At She Can, we lead with women's stories. Women lead by example, and this is our Women Investor series. And I'm very excited to talk to Helen Oldham today. Helen, welcome to She Can. You are the co-founder of Lifted Ventures, and that means you're a leader in the gender smart investing space. You help get investment for female founders and fuel the UK economy outside of London. You are a venture capitalist, a mentor, an investor, a change maker, a community builder, an up-leveler, and a female entrepreneur champion. And at your heart, you have an angel network, a women's angel syndicate and community of co-aligned investors. So tell us a little bit more about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Oh, Stephanie, thanks so much for that introduction. So yes, my background is actually media. So I started in local newspapers at the tender age of 21 and had an amazing career leading large teams of journalists, advertising staff, and all the back office staff around newspaper production right up until about 7 years ago. So in that environment, I was the managing director of the Yorkshire Post and of the Scotsman, amazing brands, and the newspaper, the national newspaper, and was privileged to be a guardian, I think, for brands that will continue, maybe in a smaller version, but for a long time from today. And in that environment, I was fortunate enough to set up a mini accelerator for media-based businesses at the Yorkshire Post offices in Leeds. And really, it was there that I started to become interested in innovation and early stage businesses. We had a cohort of 15 businesses, and a small number of those were women-led. But from there, I essentially, to cut a long story short, set up an angel network alongside a bloke who had supported me in terms of putting comms into the building in the Yorkshire Post. And we set up an angel network that covered the whole of the north of England. It was a mixed gender group. And right from the beginning, the purpose of that organisation was to be as inclusive as possible. But sort of 3 years into that, I realised that the tide in angel investing is very much around white guys investing in other white guys. And however hard you try to encourage female founders in, or more women to be angels, in a mixed environment, it's quite difficult because you're constantly getting applications from, very similar stereotypical type of people. So from there, I set up an organisation called Fund North, which was a collective of women in VCs across the north of England, with the purpose of supporting female founders, and that grew really quickly. So we were providing early stage funding, but also community support around that. And having done that for a couple of years, 3 years successfully, Jordan Darg and myself decided that we wanted to concentrate fully on that. And we stepped out of that environment and set up Lifted Ventures. So very much focused on providing early stage investment support for female founders, for all founders outside of London. I'm not saying the world's perfect in London, but there are more options for female founders there. And, the statistics show that of all the angel investors in the UK, over 50% of those women angels are in London. So by the time you sort of disseminate out of London into some of the larger regional cities like Birmingham or Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, those numbers are very small. They'll be under 10%, well under 10% of the total number of active women angels in the UK. So we're on a mission to grow that number because we know that women are more likely to back women. There's some very strong statistics from the UK Business Angels that show that women are likely to have 50% of their portfolio when they're investing in female-led businesses or co-led businesses. So that brings us right up to date. It's a very short version of how I got to where we are today.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Helen, because we don't have hours to talk about this, even though we would need hours to talk about this. So tell us a little bit how it works, Helen. So a female founder might hear about you, they'll contact you. How is your process?
So our process is it's thorough. So we have an application process through our website. So we have a standardized front door because we want to be as inclusive as we possibly can within the female founder community. And we find that there are not many warm introductions made for female founders, but sometimes warm introductions can cloud the overall decision-making process. So we have a strict rule that you must go through the website and fill in the application form. And then we go through a couple of sort of filtering conversations with Jordan Darg and myself, and then a DD conversation with our legal partner, and then through to a pitch event. So it's fairly straightforward. There's a lot of competition. I mean, there are no shortage of amazing female founders in the regions, that we can vouch for that. I mean, we typically are getting 1 or 2 applications a day, and we're filtering those down to 2, maybe 3 people in a pitch event per month. So that's the process. And then from there on, the investors are connected with the female founder, and they take the process from there on in.
Helen, I have a feeling I need to show off for you, because your impact to date has been to facilitate 450 million pounds in funding and help more than 500 entrepreneurs. And that has to be said because you have such an unbelievably broad experience of female founders and looking at their businesses, which is all incredible insight that we want to know and want content to provide to other women. Now you have a lot of experience knowing that female founders are 12% more likely to exit versus men, and they deliver 2 times higher revenue. The exit is faster. They are 12% higher revenue than men startups when venture backed. And there are so many data points that show us that women are very successful business owners and have great ideas that are worth backing. Why do you feel the experience of women raising money is so different from men, and why are the systemic barriers to funding and scaling their businesses still so crazy in 2024, where we only get 2% of VC money net?
It is, but Stephanie, I was really pleased that you started there with the sort of business, the return on investment type metrics, which should lead this conversation. So we very much are on a mission to keep promoting the fact that when you have women in your portfolio, you're more likely to get a stronger result. And at the end of the day, that's what investors are looking for. The reasons why it's so complex to access the money that you need both at seed and Series A is because there are structural issues in there. And they've been in there for some time. So about the sort of business benefits of why you would support female founders. So we're on a mission to keep promoting those sort of key metrics as to how you'd get a really good return in your portfolio by backing female founders. We want to move the conversation away from this being a sort of altruism type good thing to do in the realms of how I see my investment strategy to, you know, there are some very good, strong business reasons why you would do this. And those are I think they are understood in the market. But you asked the question about why it's still very difficult to raise funding in the UK when you're a female founder. And this is essentially a structural issue. The fact that most early stage funding organisations and most early stage VCs have men in the main decision-making roles means that there's a certain amount of unconscious bias in the process. I would say, knowing most of the guys in these organisations, it's definitely not something, an intended consequence, but my experience is that men ask different questions of female founders. They ask tougher questions, and they're more likely to focus on things like financials in a very deep way than they might do when they're interviewing or hearing a male founder pitch. So what needs to happen is all VCs and early stage investment companies making sure that their pipeline is well balanced with at least 50% of female founders, and then ensuring that when it comes to the investment committee decisions, that there are a broad mix of people on those panels, and that can take out that unconscious bias. But I think today is a great day because the Invest in Women Code data has just been released and shows that there is starting to be a shift in behaviours. So of all the people who signed up to the Invest in Women Code, which is a voluntary Treasury-backed initiative that asks people to track data in terms of their investment outcomes, then those that signed up to the code are actually seeing a much higher level of women coming through to the investment committee. So of all the people who've signed up in the last 12 months, 42% of their investments have gone to female founders. And in the general population of everybody who signed up to the Investment in Women Code, it's 32%. Yeah. So I think we should start seeing better results coming out of the statistics that we're all very familiar with, which is the 2% of VC money going to female and to female founders, and 14% to co-led and female founders.
Yeah. Helen, thank you for all of that. Now, you were talking about the questioning by the other side of the table, that is mostly men, that they're talking about more about risk mitigation and more about the downsides in the financials. It sort of creates a negative feedback loop, and women are then always sort of on the defense rather than the offense, talking about the opportunity that they're trying to present and get money for. So I'm wondering, what would you say to a female founder who is in that position? She's in that pitch meeting. She feels this is going down that typical route of the where she's in the defense rather than the offense. What tips would you give her?
So, really good question, Stephanie. So I would say the first thing is, and this is something that we work around specifically, is have a female advocate, try and find a female advocate in that VC that you can work with as you prepare for the investment committee. Now, the reason this is important is because we know that the female investment manager or investment director in that organization, first of all, will help advocate for you within the organization and help you get to the IC in the first place, but they will also help you to prepare for the questions. I think when you're actually in the live environment, obviously you just need to do the best you can to answer the questions that you've been pitched. And I think just having that extra level of preparation, I know that we shouldn't need to do this, but the reality is you want to get funded. Most women I see pitch at a really good standard, especially when you put them up against their male peers. I went to a sort of cohort event, demo day last week, and saw 20 people pitch, of which 3 were female founders. And I would put those 3 female founders in the top 25% of all the people that pitched. Yeah. So generally speaking, I think women are super well prepared in the pitch environment and do a really good job of promoting their businesses. And like I said, I would just hope that the Women Invest in Women Code statistics shows that there is starting to be a change in behaviours and intent inside VCs.
Helen, and do you think that we are creating more barriers by calling ourselves female founders? Should we just drop the gender specific sort of, are we putting ourselves into that corner then? Should we just forget about it and say these are founders and stop making it a sort of gender specific picture?
So these are the kind of debates that we grapple with every day, Stephanie. So I would say I agree with you when it comes to investment committees, when it comes to investment decisions, we should just be talking about founders. I think there are some good reasons to have some siloed activity. One is we know that in the women angels environment, that women are more likely to start their investment journey when they're working alongside other women, because they feel like they're in a safe space. They can ask all the questions that they've got on their mind without feeling any intimidation or being unable to ask questions that they might perceive as being a bit basic.
Yeah.
My experience is they're great questions. So I think curating women angels networks is actually a very important part of the systems change that we need to create. And it's good to see that there are more of those emerging in the UK. And I think there's been 3 or 4 in the last 12 months, which is good to see.
Yeah.
We also know that from the McKinsey statistics that women in business are more likely to be successful if they have a strong peer group of other women in their networks that they can rely on for cheerleading, support, problem solving. I think McKinsey says that you're 25% more likely to be successful in that environment. So there's a good reason for having some women only focused activity. But I think you're right, when it comes to the wider environment, we should just be talking about founders. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it has. Helen, so give us some guidelines for women on how to choose an investor. Women often go around and they do, months and months of trying to find an investor. What do you feel they should be looking out for?
So I think this starts really early on, Stephanie, in that when women are building a business and they understand that equity investment is going to be the right way forward for them. And I think the first thing to say is only 2% of businesses are right for equity investment. There are lots of other options that are worth considering first. But if equity is the right route, then the first thing to do is start networking very early on. So show up at places where you know that you're going to find investors. In particular, I would recommend showing up in places where there will be women angel investors if you're a female-led business or a co-led business, and start building out a network of people who are interested in what you're doing, because they are the low-hanging fruit, aren't they? They're the people who are most likely to invest in you in those early rounds. The first bit of investment outside of friends and family, if you're fortunate enough to be able to access that capital. Not everybody is. And then I think seeking out organizations that are sort of mission aligned. So I would take Lifted Ventures as one of those, understanding the process, understanding what the best way to engage with these organizations are. There are other great ones as well. I would also recommend Mesa, Armor Angels, Angel Academy, all really good. Understanding and meeting some people in those organizations so that you're well prepared, I think would be my best piece of advice. And my secondary advice would be just to keep an open mind. Quite often the investor comes from an unexpected place, and from a circumstance that you could never have predicted. Having in mind an absolutely ideal investor is probably a little bit too narrow a gauge, I think, to be thinking about at this stage.
Helen, and how, it's very clear that you don't only provide investment, you provide mentoring, it's full of guidance and advice, because that just makes that venture more successful in the long run. And you've been doing it a long time and you know that. So what do you think, how can women build value faster? Because I understand that the other sort of hurdle is that women build businesses with far fewer resources. Therefore, they are just slower, potentially. So how can we change that?
Yeah, so typically, we see women come to us with businesses where there may be just 2 to 4 people in that business. And I think you're right, they are under-resourced quite often. So in that situation, what we would do is connect them to our angel network, who are also amazing mentors. So just recently, I connected an AI-driven heritage maintenance focused business, building maintenance business, with 3 angels in our network around things like IP, commercialization, to help them get to the point where they would be fully investment ready. So I think, having mentors, having advisors, being really open to asking for help from as many places as possible is a really smart way to accelerate your progress. I think this is a little bit of a generalization, but men tend to be a little bit better networked and to draw on those resources more quickly, or to be offered them because they're more easily accessible, or have a greater profile in the market as to who you might go to. So yeah, I would definitely recommend that. And then there are also great sources of support from people like Innovate UK. I appreciate there's been a lot of noise around that, but there are some people in Innovate UK can provide some really great support for female-led businesses, particularly in more sort of technical areas of innovation. So think about those kind of support networks as well.
Helen, and give us a little bit of a vision, your big vision for the next years for you and Lift Adventures.
So what we are aiming to do is to demonstrate that the regions, so the cities outside of London, can be the forerunners in terms of gender smart investment. I think in some respects, because they're slightly smaller in size, you can actually create change in a more agile and an accelerated way, and that's what we're looking to do, working with partners. I mean, you also talked about how can you support founders to grow, and we run a number of education programs on how to access investment, and we also run a really well-established program for angel investors, first-time angel investors, to understand what are the building blocks of building a successful angel investment portfolio. So our vision is a combination of education to accelerate change and then increasing the flow of capital. And those two things together, I think, have the ability to change that environment in a really meaningful way.
Helen, I'm so grateful for all your amazing insight, all your incredible experience, and all the advice you just gave us. And thank you so much for talking to me today for our Women Investor series.
That's okay. It was a pleasure. Thanks, Stephanie.